Hello, friends, and namaste. I am your host, Preeta Lal, and welcome to this space where we will read chapters from the epic book, Eternal Values for a Changing Society, by the late revered Swami Ranganathananda. If you have listened to my pilot episode, then you will have an idea about who the stalwart of wisdom and spirituality was and why this particular book bears a lot of relevance in today's society. At the risk of repeating myself, I will mention this was written some 55 years ago. But as we go through the chapters, and I will just be reading them, you will find the basis of relevance in our day-to-day life and living. I am from India, ladies and gentlemen. I have lived in the United States for 27 years now, but my heart and my soul belong to my city of Kolkata. And what I found most fascinating as I started to read the first chapter, which I will share with you in this episode, is how little, even as an Indian, I know about India. So we will start at the very beginning, and Swamiji's words will enlighten us as to the phenomenon that this country is all about from a historic, cultural, and a spiritual aspect. Without any further ado, we will start with the first chapter of this remarkable book, Eternal Values for a Changing Society. The Essence of Indian Culture. Introduction. The subject of Indian culture is a theme difficult to expound in the course of a short talk. The long history of this culture, its different expressions, and its rich variety make it difficult to deal with it in the course of a few minutes. The subject is interesting for a special reason. Every ancient culture holds some interest for all of us, but when the culture is a continuing culture, that interest becomes much more contemporary, much more topical. In the case of the study of ancient cultures like the Babylonian or the Egyptian, or even the ancient Greek, we study them more from a historical point of view, just to enrich ourselves from the experiences of the past. But the study of Indian culture is of special significance to us, because it is still a living factor in the life of nearly 1/7 of the human race. How this culture arose nearly 5,000 years ago, how it developed and was enriched in subsequent centuries, and finally how it has come down to us as a rich human legacy is therefore a very fascinating and rewarding study. Indian culture, a historic phenomenon. Says Will Durant in The Story of Civilization, Our Oriental Heritage, in the opening paragraph of the section on India, and I quote, "Nothing should more deeply shame the modern student than the recency and the inadequacy of his acquaintance with India. Here is a vast peninsula of nearly 2 million square miles, 2/3 as large as the United States and 20 times the size of its master, Great Britain, 320 million souls, more than in all of North and South America combined, or 1/5 of the population of the earth. An impressive continuity of development and civilization from Mohenjo-daro, 2900 BC or earlier, to Gandhi, Raman and Tagore, faiths compassing every stage from barbarous idolatry to the most subtle and spiritual pantheism. Philosophers playing 1,000 variations on one monastic theme from the Upanishads 8 centuries before Christ to Shankara 8 centuries after him. Scientists developing astronomy 3,000 years ago and winning Nobel Prizes in our own time. A democratic constitution of untraceable antiquity in the villages and wise and beneficent rulers like Ashoka and Akbar in the capitals. Minstrels singing great epics almost as old as Homer, and poets holding world audiences today. Artists raising gigantic temples for Hindu gods from Tibet to Ceylon and from Cambodia to Java, or carving perfect palaces by the score for Mughal kings and queens. This is the India that patient scholarship is now opening up like a new intellectual continent to that Western mind which only yesterday thought civilization an exclusively European thing. Unquote. Swamiji continues. The UNESCO-sponsored book, Traditional Cultures in Southeast Asia, published by Orient Longmans, gives the following definition of culture, as mentioned by Professor K.A. Nilakanta Shastri. Culture means the total accumulation of material objects, ideas, symbols, beliefs, sentiments, values, and social forms which are passed on from one generation to another in any given society. The subject of culture is generally divided into two categories, namely material and mental. We can study Indian culture from these two aspects. All early developments of a culture relate to its development in its material aspect. So far as India is concerned, we are not able to tell where or at what date this culture started. Dating in Indian history, especially as we go back, becomes extremely difficult, but from the data gathered patiently by historians and research workers, we have come to know that when the Indian people first appear on the horizon of history, they have already acquired a developed form of material culture. The Rig Veda, their first written record, and which is also the first written record of humankind, gives us the picture of a people who have already settled down to a life of agriculture, village handicrafts, and village organization, and who exhibit a good deal of the love of life, of poetry, and of war. So to deal with the material culture of these people in its early beginnings is rather difficult. Going back further still, if we accept the viewpoint of several eminent historians that the Indus Valley civilization is pre-Rig Vedic, even so, that civilization also appears on the horizon in its developed form as a highly sophisticated urban culture. Thus, it is extremely difficult to deal with the earliest beginnings of Indian culture. But one thing strikes us, and it is this. When this culture makes its debut on the stage of human history, it discloses a state of social evolution long past the primitive stage and poised for a mighty advance on the plane of mind and thought. For the Rig Vedic Indians, whom historians call Indo-Aryans, were an energetic race of people. They were deeply religious and they had leisure. These conditions led them to invest their surplus energies on the plane of the mind. We know from the science of anthropology that when a group achieves a measure of stability and security in the material base of its culture through settled agriculture and industry, thus allowing for a certain amount of leisure, it tends to invest its surplus leisure in the higher plane of humans' inner life, thus giving rise to the second aspect of its culture, namely the mental culture. In the Rig Veda, we are already face to face with this emergence of the life of the mind, the life of thought, not merely in the field of literature, but also in the field of bold philosophical speculation, asking questions about the nature of the universe and the meaning of human existence. Starting very early in the life of the Indian people, in the Rig Vedic period, this philosophic temper and inward bias were to grow in range and volume in later centuries, so as eventually to become the dominant characteristic of Indian culture. The Vedic worldview. The vast and varied Vedic literature gives us an insight into the mind and mood of India in those days. The thoughts and insights gained by the gifted minds of the Vedic period became the foundation and the stimulus of all later developments of culture and thought in India. They have bequeathed a worldview that has sustained India for centuries and that is dynamic even today. To understand Indian culture, we have to get an insight into this view. Every culture and civilization has behind it the inspiration of a philosophy. The understanding of that philosophy is necessary for the comprehension of the mind and mood and processes of its culture or civilization. A civilization without a philosophy, says Hegel, is like a temple without the Holy of Holies. Indian culture in its long career has experimented with life in its diverse aspects and levels. It has not neglected any of the values of life, but it has concentrated more on some than on others. Politics, economics, art, science, religion, and philosophy, all these have been enriched by its contributions, but its greatest and most unique contribution is in the field of religion and philosophy. To treat Indian culture and outlook as otherworldly, as some Western writers have done, is thus not true to fact. Otherworldliness, transcendentalism, is undoubtedly its characteristic feature. But at the base of this transcendentalism is a robust positivism with the zest in life and its expression in art, literature, music, and dance. Says Dr. Brajendranath Seal in The Positive Sciences of Ancient Hindus, published in 1914, in the foreword, and I quote, "The Hindus, no less than the Greeks, have shared in the work of constructing scientific concepts and methods in the investigation of physical phenomena, as well as of building up a body of positive knowledge which has been applied to industrial technique and Hindu scientific ideas and methodology. For example, the inductive method or methods of algebraic analysis have deeply influenced the course of natural philosophy in Asia and in the East, as well as in the West, in China and Japan, as well as in the Saracen Empire. India has been known to other nations as a land of wealth and philosophic wisdom. Both trade with India and communion with her mind and thought were much sought after. These facts go to show that the people of ancient India took keen interest in the human being as a member of society, the human struggling to overcome external obstacles, and the human seeking delight in social and personal existence. This is an aspect of culture that we find prominent in the India of the Rig Veda, and that, though relegated to second place in later ages in the wake of a new thought development, was never treated as a value of no consequence in any period of its long history. The mind and mood of the Indo-Aryans. The picture of the Indo-Aryan creators of this culture depicted by the Rig Veda reveals to us a race of sturdy people, bubbling with youthfulness and vivacity, energy and zest. They were endowed with the love of life, capacity for work, and a gift for poetry, and later for philosophy as well. There is no touch of pessimism in the atmosphere of the Rig Veda. Transcendental elements are undoubtedly there, yet there is no indication of hankering or passion for anything transcendental except a keen desire to go to heaven after death. This heaven is but an idealized form of the sensuous life on earth and a welcome change from the humdrum life here below. The Rig Vedic Indians were frankly worldly, and they were not apologetic about it either. In this, they bear a close relationship to people who belong to our contemporary civilization. Both are positivists who bend even religion to positivistic purposes. But the Indo-Aryans were not content to live at that level of their bodies. Their dynamic and restless minds could not long remain content with an easy and pleasant life. With stability achieved at the material and social levels, their mental life began to experience deep stirrings and questionings, which slowly led them to question their erstwhile philosophy of facile optimism and to forge ahead to wider horizons of thought and deeper levels of experience. Towards the end of the Vedic period, Indian history entered its most creative period through the Upanishads, which, so far as the whole subsequent history of India is concerned, is also the most decisive and pervasive. In the Upanishads, we see the mental life of the human being reaching the summit and surveying from that height the whole field of experience below. The philosophic legacy of the Indo-Aryans. This spirit of inquiry that possessed the Indo-Aryan mind led them to question experience, to question the environing world, to question their gods and their tenets of their traditional faiths. They did not fear to doubt when rational, certain knowledge was hard to come by. They illustrate the truth of the creative role of skepticism. In the pursuit of truth, such skepticism is but the prelude to rational faith. When they sought for the truth of the external universe, they found it baffling. Inquiry only deepened the mystery. The Nasadya Sukta of the Rig Veda records the impact of this mystery on the Indo-Aryan mind. That mind discovered early, as modern thinkers are slowly discovering today, that the mystery of the external world will only deepen and not diminish, in spite of the advancing knowledge, if the mystery of the inner world is not tackled. For a complete philosophy of reality, there is need to have the data from both the fields of experience, the outer and the inner. In constructing a philosophy of external nature, we rely on the data supplied by the senses. We start with this data, but very soon we are compelled to go beyond them on the wings of speculation. Early Indian speculations in the field of cosmology are bold and daring, and they bear close kinship with the cosmological speculations of modern scientific thought. Early Indian scientists, like modern scientists, posited a self-evolving cause behind the entire universe. An important corollary of this is what the Indian thinkers referred to as the non-difference between cause and effect. Effect is only cause in another form. The effect is the gross form of which the subtle form is the cause. All things and events in nature, including the human, are subject to this cause and effect process. Nothing happens arbitrarily or haphazardly. By rational, objective investigation, humans can unravel the cause or causes of events and gain control over nature's processes. A second point of the close kinship between the two is the concept of evolution. The Indo-Aryans advanced the theory of the universe being the product of an evolutionary process and not the creation of an extra cosmic deity. They believed in cosmic as well as organic evolution. The universe is not static but dynamic. Cosmic energy passes from the undifferentiated to the differentiated state. Their concept of nature was far more comprehensive than even that of modern science. It included not only the physical, biological, but also the mental and spiritual aspects of the universe of experience. The third point of kinship is that there is no place for the supernatural in the Indian thought. The conflict between mind and matter and that between natural and supernatural, so characteristic of modern Western thought, are unknown to Indian thought. Fourthly, the modern theories of the conservation of energy and the unity of matter and energy, which are revolutionary discoveries in modern thought, are integral parts of Indian philosophical thought. And fifthly, the vastness of cosmic time and space, as well as the relativity of both, is another important point of contact between ancient Indian thought and modern scientific thought. These few examples are enough to show the rational bent and speculative daring of these early Indian thinkers. In the Upanishads, we get a glimpse into the workings of their minds. They were unhampered by the tyranny of religious dogma or political authority, or even the pressure of public opinion. They sought truth with a single-minded devotion, rare in the history of thought. In the words of Max Muller in Six Systems of Indian Philosophy, in page 182, he says, "It is surely astounding that such a system as the Vedanta should have been slowly elaborated by the indefatigable and intrepid thinkers of India thousands of years ago. A system that even now makes us feel giddy as in mounting the last steps of the swaying spire of an ancient Gothic cathedral. None of our philosophers, not excepting Heraclitus, Plato, Kant, or Hegel, has ventured to erect such a spire, even frightened by storms of lightning. Stone follows on stones after regular succession, after once the first step has been made, after once it has been clearly seen that in the beginning there can have been but one, and there will be but one in the end, whether we call it Atman or Brahman. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. We will close here today. And in the next episode, we will read chapters where Swami Ranganathananda ji talks about and introduces the concept and the essence of the Upanishads and how they relate to modern scientific thought and where the human being fits in all of this in the context of ancient spiritual texts of India, her culture, her civilization, and the ethos with which this country has come into being. Until next time, this is your host, Preetha Lal. Thank you for joining me in the sacred space, and I look forward to sharing more with you next time. Thank you and namaste.